Welcome back to Upside Down Data. Let's talk about Kaspa and how high it could realistically go in a full bull market. So Kaspa is an asset that's caught a lot of people's attention. It is a layer one blockchain, but probably the most notable thing about it is it's very fast, very scalable, and it uses proof of work as its consensus model, not proof of stake, which a lot of other alternative layer ones use. So people have gotten really interested in this because some people do prefer proof of work as a consensus model versus proof of stake. Won't go into all the reasons for that. But then it's got that on top of other technological innovations that it's doing to make it so fast and scalable that's got a lot of attention. And that's also probably partly the narrative that's been catapulting its price up so far, so extremely ever since it launched in late 2022. Just look at the rise from its all-time low here all the way up to where it's currently trading. It's about 8,500%. Very nice move to the upside. But that's all the past. The question I think a lot of people are asking now then is how high could it go in a full bull market? So to answer that question, I like to use an approach that leverages machine learning and simulation. So if you've seen previous videos before, you're probably familiar with this. But basically it's a way of getting a sense of what is a realistic price prediction, or at least an expectation of where price could be for KAS in that type of situation. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first step of this approach is to build this machine learning based model to give a general sense of where the asset's price, in this case KAS, is going to be at a given point in time. And so you can kind of think of this sort of like a fair value, that based on the inputs, where do you expect the price of KAS to be? And this model takes in just three inputs to keep it simple. It takes in time, so basically date. It takes in the price of Bitcoin and the price of Ethereum. And the reason for that is that if you know where the price of Bitcoin is at a given point in time, if you know where the price of Ethereum is at a given point in time, probably gives you a pretty good idea of where other assets should be. Basically, crypto follows Bitcoin and Ethereum, so where they are tends to dictate the rest of the market. And then time is included as a factor to kind of catch everything else that's going on with time, kind of over time, that's not captured by the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so it gives a reasonable sense here of where the price of KAS should be at a given point in time, with some volatility of the actual price around that kind of fair value estimate. But the nice thing about having a model like this is we can then ask it questions. Say, given theoretical situations in the future, where do you expect the kind of fair value or expected price of KAS to be? And so we can ask it relatively bullish scenarios. So if Bitcoin was at 200,000, ETH at 20,000 at a given date in the future, in this case, middle of 2025, it'll predict a price of $1.54 for KAS. Pretty nice move from current levels, about a 15x. In a less bullish, but still bull market scenario, for example, Bitcoin at 80K, ETH at 9K, it would just be at here 87 cents, so a little bit lower in its prediction. But as I talked about before with this approach, just cherry picking a couple different scenarios isn't all that useful. How do we know that these are really the ones to pay attention to? And so that's where the simulation approach really comes in. So basically what we do here is we say, let's just think about what are realistic ranges that Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a time for which a bull market, full bull market might kind of peak out at or get to. So with Bitcoin, I think most people would expect it to top out somewhere between its prior all-time high, and in this case, around 5 times that level, 345K. Ethereum, 4.8K to 28.8, so this is about 6 times its prior all-time high. I think most people would expect it to be somewhere in that range. And dates similarly, somewhere between mid-2024 and 2026. That's where we generally, from historically speaking, think that a bull market would probably peak out if we are indeed in the beginnings of a bull market right now. So what you do then with this approach is that you randomly sample from these plausible ranges, and then you just basically ask the model, given this Bitcoin price, given this ETH price, and given this date that we've randomly chosen, where would you expect a kind of fair or expected value of KAS to be in that situation? You record that value, then you do it again and again and again 10,000 times. And what that gives you is this nice distribution of predicted KAS prices or expected KAS prices given the different inputs that we're putting in over those 10,000 iterations. So we look at what is the average expected price, what is the median expected price, to give us a general ballpark plausible idea of where KAS might be expected to be in a full bull market. So then we can just look at, first off, the overall statistics, and then we can look at the distribution. I'll show that next. So the mean predicted price for KAS is here at $2.51. Pretty nice. That's about 25x from current levels. Median, a little bit lower, 2.16. Still quite nice. Then I also have percentiles here. And basically the idea here is that 10% of the simulations fell below 86 cents, 10% fell above $4.80, then 80% fell in between, to give you a sense of where the different simulations tended to cluster and the more or less likely kind of bounds based on that. So we can also look then just at the distribution. So what you can see is that a lot of the simulations cluster up through around $1 to $2, somewhere in between there. And then we do have this tail of less and less likely, but more and more bullish scenarios coming out here. And so then when you look at this, this is why the median is lower than the mean. The mean is getting biased up by these extreme outliers over here. So the median, being the middle value, is a little bit lower. But overall, relatively close in that kind of $2.16 to $2.5 range is where these fell. So that is what the simulation is suggesting as plausible values for KAS in that full bull market, given those possible plausible inputs. Let's go ahead and flip back to the chart then, just talk about what would this mean for the actual return from current levels if this were to materialize in a full bull market. So to get up to the median price, that would be a return of about 1,800%, quite nice from current levels. And then to get to the mean, that would be all the way up here at 2,100%. So pretty nice returns, I would say. And of course, that's just the mean and the median. There were some values that were even considerably higher, getting all the way up to $7 and above, which would be even more impressive. So this is all predicated on the full bull market happening, of course. And also one thing that's important to mention with KAS is that it does have relatively limited price history. And so the model is training itself on a relatively limited set of data in terms of how it relates to Bitcoin price, Ethereum price, and all those other things that are feeding into that time dimension. So keep that in mind. That's a little bit more tentative given its relatively young age. But I do think it gives us a reasonable starting point, that if we're just going to think, where is a reasonable place that KAS might end up, or a reasonable projection or forecast, I think this gives us a nice way of doing that. And certainly it's not bearish by any means here. And what I think it really helps to do is that in a full bull market, things are ripping to the upside, things are going crazy. What can happen is that emotions get really hot and people just think that things will go up only forever. What you can imagine is, let's say we do get a full bull market and KAS is nearing these levels. When you're there, people rarely are going to be telling you that it's the top. In fact, people are just going to keep moving the goalposts and say it's going to keep going higher and higher and higher. You get to $2 KAS and suddenly everyone's calling for $4 KAS, and so on and so forth. And it just keeps on going. And so this gives us, I think, a way of grounding ourselves before that happens. That based on what we know right now, these seem like reasonable projections. And if we get there, should we really just be changing our opinion based on the emotion that we feel at the time? Or should we maybe think that we're getting a little bit towards where we'd expect to be, and maybe that's about as good as the market's going to give us at that point in time? Now, I know this is financial advice. You should make your own opinions, assess the data as you will, and make your own opinions. But I do like this as an exercise. Just give a hypothesis that's reasonable based on what we know, and that's based on actual data and not just pulling numbers from thin air, which a lot of people do with these projections. They'll just pull out random numbers that really don't mean anything. This at least has an empirical basis to it. And then if we end up getting there, we can then use that as our prior belief and then evaluate, is there really enough new evidence to move that prior belief, or should maybe we think that this is a reasonable place for it to be hitting in that bull market? So of course, you should make your own opinions, but that's one of the things that I'm looking at right now when it comes to KAS. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on X. A lot of updates about our models and more over there. And go to our website, claritydigital.io, for live data from our models and more.